You're not just looking at the world is looking back at you. And what you feel as a blockage might be the exact point where you're being tested. Not an ordinary test, not about right or wrong, but a vibrational test, silent, invisible, where your very reality dresses itself in your fears and watches you react. You know that cycle that insists on repeating, that conversation that comes back with another voice, that discomfort that appears even when everything seems fine. That's not by chance. It's an intelligent field, designed to activate what you still try to avoid. If you feel that something invisible is challenging you all the time, you're not crazy. You're awake. And those who awaken are summoned, not to go with the flow, but to see where the flow lies. You are not here by accident. Few access this kind of perception. Even fewer sustain such clarity without running away. But if you've made it this far, it's because something in you has already crossed the veil. Carl Jung did not write for the common. He wrote for those who listen in silence, and he said, "What you deny submits you, what you accept transforms you." So ask yourself, what if what you are facing is not a punishment, but proof that you are already ready? This video is a mirror that returns the right question. Is it reality that limits you, or your reading of it? If you sense that you're not just living, but being examined by the invisible, stay. What is about to emerge here is not an explanation. It's an ancient memory, encoded in the frequency you're just beginning to remember. There's something no one told you about real spirituality. The more you awaken, the quieter the tests become. There is no explicit sign. There is no clear warning, just a subtle discomfort, a tightening knot, an almost imperceptible repetition. Life doesn't shout, it whispers, and those who haven't learned to listen in silence repeat. You may think you're being sabotaged by fate, but what if it's you still acting like someone you no longer are? Perhaps you are being tested not by external reality, but by the old resonance you still carry in your most subtle gestures. The way you respond to a conflict, the emotion that's triggered in the face of waiting, the anxiety that appears when control slips away. All of this is being read by a field that doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to what you vibrate. Few talk about this because few can handle the truth. Reality is not an accomplice to your will. It is a mirror of your consciousness. And no matter how much you ask for change, for peace, for direction, if you still vibrate with fear, lack, or avoidance, that is what will be amplified, not as punishment, but with precision. You are being tested not to prove something, but to become something. This is the blind spot of many seekers. They think the path is about receiving signs, intuitions, blessings. But the path, most of the time, is about enduring the void between an old cycle dissolving and a new one not yet born. Perhaps you are exactly there, on the silent bridge between what no longer serves and what has not yet arrived. And it's in that interval that the tests intensify, because it's in that space that you can finally choose differently. But there's something even more subtle and rarer. To see the test not as an obstacle but as confirmation. The pain that returns doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're ready to respond from a different place. That changes everything. Perhaps the conversation that repeated today, the obsessive thought that came back, the impatience in the face of waiting. Perhaps none of this is a problem to be solved, but a code to be deciphered. And the code is always the same. Will you react as before, or observe as never before? Your response is the ritual that determines the next cycle. Reality does not bend to your force. It transmutes in the face of your clarity. That's why this is no longer just another video on how to change your life. It's a vibrational crossing for those who have realized it's no longer about asking the universe, but about listening to what it's already saying. And what it says often comes disguised as silence, as disconnection, as waiting. But this silence is not absence, it is refinement. It's as if consciousness itself were testing you to see if you've stopped fighting what it wants to show you. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, a state where you stop being led by the desires of the ego and begin to recognize the movements of the soul. This moment, the exact moment when you feel you're losing control, may in fact be the turning point your soul chose. But only those who cross the test with presence can see the mirror, and the mirror always reveals not what you want to see, but what you need to integrate. Today, perhaps for the first time, you can look at everything that confronts you, not as an enemy, but as a messenger, and understand that every discomfort is simply life asking, Will you still react like yesterday, or do you already know who you are now? There is a subtle idea, almost imperceptible, that shapes the way you live, that reality is judging you, as if failures were punishments, as if delays were penalties. But what if there were no judgment at all? What if everything you interpret as failure were in fact a return, an echo of your own vibration, reflected back with absolute precision? Reality has no morality. It does not punish, does not reward, does not take revenge. It mirrors. That's why so many feel confused after long journeys of self-discovery. Even after reading, practicing, meditating, they still face the same ghosts. The emptiness still comes at the end of the day. The doubts still invade in the middle of the night. The reactions still slip out before they can be contained. This is not regression, this is a clean mirror, because the closer you get to your truth, the more reality removes the filters, and then it shows. Shows without anesthesia, not to hurt you, but so there is no doubt about what still vibrates within you. Only those who are awake feel the discomfort of being out of sync with their own essence. Most live on autopilot. You feel. And that is a blessing disguised as a crisis. But here's the point few understand. As long as you see what happens as an error, you'll keep trying to correct the effect. You'll keep asking why this is still happening, instead of perceiving exactly what is being revealed behind the event, because there is a vibrational difference between trying to change and beginning to observe. The attempt comes from resistance, observation from presence, and only presence has alchemical power. Only it can transmute. Jung knew this when he wrote that everything not brought to consciousness becomes destiny, not as a curse, but as an unintegrated reflection. In other words, as long as you do not see what your reality is trying to show you, it will continue repeating the same patterns, with other names, other voices, other dates, but with the same essence. And here is the crucial point. You are not trapped by facts. You are trapped by the unconscious interpretation you carry of them. Reality does not hurt you. It repeats because you still believe in what you no longer are. And that is the real test, not to resist what returns, but to see why it returns. Resistance creates tension. Tension fragments. Fragmentation makes you forget who you are. But observation heals, because observing with awareness is choosing not to lose yourself. And here there is a rare vibrational invitation, perhaps the most important of this journey, to trade the question, why is this happening to me, for what is this revealing about me now? This change of lens changes everything. From this place, life ceases to be a sequence of random events and becomes a conscious dialogue. You stop fighting against situations and start aligning with what they are trying to restore within you. And it's at this point that something magical begins to happen. The tests don't disappear, but they lose their weight. The repetition continues, but it no longer wounds. You still feel, but now you know. And knowing is freedom. The quantum field does not respond to your willpower. It responds to the clarity of your presence. You no longer need to prove anything to the universe. You just need to remember who you are, when everything invites you to forget. And that remembrance is what the test is trying to return to you. There comes a moment on the spiritual path when you realize something uncomfortable. The scenarios change, but the feeling is the same. You change cities, jobs, relationships, and suddenly a new situation begins to carry the same bitter taste you thought you'd left behind. This is not bad luck. It's not cruel fate. It's precision. Reality is not interested in offering you rest before the time comes. It's interested in showing you in detail where your frequency still bends inward to the same pattern. And when you understand this, the anger that once arose gives way to an almost cutting lucidity, because you begin to see that life is extremely intelligent in the way it repeats the plot until you finally change the way you read it. Perhaps today, while you listen to these words, you feel a certain tiredness. It's not physical fatigue, it's soul weariness. The feeling of being ready for something new, yet still stuck in old trials. And here's the truth that few can sustain. The test doesn't end when you decide to pass it. It ends when you change your presence within it. You may be waiting for a situation to disappear so you can feel peace, but the test is exactly the opposite. To find peace while the situation is still here, not as resignation, but as a reminder that your essence is not shaped by what happens. This is rare, and that's why it's so valuable, because it's not about controlling reality, but about not allowing it to control your vibration. Lao Tzu said, "He who conquers himself is invincible." That conquest is not grand in the eyes of the world, it's almost invisible. It's the moment when something tries to pull you into the old reaction, and you silently choose another frequency. That moment is spiritual gold, because that is where the test loses its power. But life is patient. If you don't cross it, it returns, with another form, another face, another setting, but with the same disguised question, are you still the same as before? And it's at this point that many confuse relapse with failure. It's not failure, it's just reality checking whether the change is already imprinted in your vibration, or if it was only a mental decision. The mind decides quickly. Vibration only changes with conscious repetition. That's why often the test needs to reappear, not as punishment, but as confirmation. And when you begin to recognize this pattern, something deep settles in. Trust in the process. You stop fearing the returns, because you know they don't come to trap you, but to free you from the last layer that still resists. True progress is not when reality stops testing you. It's when you stop fighting the test, when discomfort comes, and instead of hardening, you open up. Instead of speeding up, you slow down. Instead of defending yourself, you observe. This change in posture is not passivity, it's spiritual maturity. It's the certainty that nothing that is truly yours will be lost, and nothing that needs to go can be held back. And in this state, repetition ceases to be a prison. It becomes a silent proof that you are ready for another level of reality. Because deep down, it's not the world that changes first. It's you. And when you change, the mirror can no longer show what no longer exists. There comes a point on the path when the game changes silently. And it's not because life has become easier, but because you are no longer positioned where you once were. As long as you see yourself as the target of the test, everything feels heavy. Every delay feels personal. Every repetition feels unfair. Every silence from the universe sounds like abandonment. But when you move past the perception that the test is about passing or failing, something deep dissolves. Because the focus shifts from passing to being. And being in this sense doesn't mean settling. It means aligning, not with the situation, but with the inner place where no situation defines your worth. Perhaps you've already felt a glimpse of this, a moment when something that once would have unsettled you simply found no space to touch you, not because the circumstance changed, but because you no longer vibrated from the same wound. This is the subtlety that transforms. Reality doesn't change because you demand it. It changes because you're no longer the same point of observation that attracted it in the first place. And here's what almost no one realizes. The test is an invitation for you to leave the narrative of me against life and enter the awareness of me with life. Because deep down, the test is not a trial of endurance, it's a trial of presence. And presence is not just being aware of what happens. It's being able to feel deeply without losing yourself in the feeling. It's remaining open even when everything asks you to close. Few get here. Most still respond to the test by trying to speed up its end. But those who begin to understand what's really happening slow down. And in slowing down, something precious happens. The test loses its meaning as a test and becomes a dialogue. And it's in this dialogue that you start hearing what you didn't hear before. The silence of the universe ceases to be absence and becomes an answer. The repetitions cease to be punishments and become confirmations that you are at a key point in your transformation. When Jung spoke of integrating the shadow, he didn't mean eliminating what bothers you, but recognizing that it is also you, and that, by embracing what you reject, you cease to be divided. And once whole, the test can no longer find gaps. This doesn't mean that challenging situations will never arise again. It means that when they do, they won't find the same person. And that difference is everything, because the test is not external, it is always internal. And when you stop identifying with the role of target and start seeing yourself as the very observer of the process, the game stops being about survival and becomes about creation. You begin to realize that you are not here to defeat reality, but to become so aware of it that you can shape it. And shaping doesn't mean manipulating. It means tuning in. Tuning in is the state where the test no longer needs to teach you through pain, because the lesson has already been absorbed, and in that moment life changes its tone. The same scenarios that once brought resistance now flow with ease. Not because they transformed, but because you are no longer stuck in the vibration that sustained them. This is the moment when you cease to be a target and become a conscious participant. And when this happens, there's a kind of freedom that cannot be taken away, because it depends on nothing external. It's born from the recognition that nothing that comes from outside can determine what you are inside. And it's exactly there that the test ends. Not with applause, not with visible rewards, but with the simple and silent perception, I am no longer the same. There is a moment on the path when you realize that nothing is against you anymore. Not because circumstances have aligned perfectly, but because something inside you has moved to a place where the world can no longer hurt you in the same way. This moment is rare, and, for most, almost imperceptible. Life keeps happening. Challenges still arrive, losses still hurt, uncertainties still arise. But there is something different deep within your field, a presence that observes without collapsing, a clarity that remains even when the ground shakes. This is the moment when the test stops being an obstacle and reveals itself as a portal, because you no longer react from the impulse of survival. You respond in the frequency of creation, and this changes everything. You begin to understand that each experience, no matter how uncomfortable, contains a key that doesn't open external doors, but internal portals to layers of consciousness you had not yet inhabited. Perhaps until now you have seen the test as something to endure, but now you begin to perceive it as a teacher that teaches without words, that points to invisible directions, and demands from you a kind of attention that goes beyond the mind. This is the point where many give up, because it demands more than strength, it demands surrender. And surrender is not giving up. It is letting go of the fight against what already is. It is allowing reality to show you what it has always tried to show, without your resistance distorting the signal. And when that happens, something profound is revealed. Life was never against you. It was only reflecting what you were not yet ready to see. The quantum field does not reward blind effort. It responds to the precision of your vibration. And this precision is not achieved with anxiety or haste, but with presence and consistency. Here you realize that the repetitive cycles that once tired you are now just reminders. Reminders that there is still something to integrate, not something to fear. You begin to move with more softness, not because you are less attentive, but because you are more aligned. And in this state, something curious happens. The test dissolves without announcement. There is no great victory to show the world. There is only a new lightness settling in your chest, and a silent certainty that something has closed. Jung said that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Arriving here is exactly that, realizing that fate is not something that happens to you. It is something you sustain vibrationally until you decide to sustain it differently. The portal opens when you understand that you are not here to pass the test, but to recognize that the test has always been a reflection of you. And in that moment, reality begins to behave like an extension of your clarity. What once took years to change begins to adjust almost effortlessly, not because the world yielded, but because you no longer vibrate from scarcity, fear, or avoidance. This transition is silent and sacred. It is not meant to be celebrated publicly, but to be lived in the intimacy of your own field, because from this point on you no longer need anyone's approval, not even life's. You are in communion with it, and when this communion happens, the notion of test loses its meaning. What remains is the flow. A flow that carries you, not because you have given up choosing, but because now you choose along with it. This is the place where you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start saying, I recognize what this is showing me. And in that recognition, the entire landscape changes, not because the scene is different, but because the observer is no longer the same. The portal is not at the end of the journey. It opens right here, where you decide to stop fighting reality and begin walking with it. Reality was never against you. It has always been the exact mirror of your frequency, adjusting precisely to what you sustain in silence. The test was never about winning. It was about remembering that you are not what happens, but what remains when everything happens. When that remembrance settles in, the world stops being a threat and becomes a language. Each repetition becomes a sign, each silence an answer, and you realize that you are not here to survive the test, but to cross it whole, conscious, awake. If something in this video resonated in your field, leave in the comments, "I walk with reality." That way, I will know that you have made it to the very last moment of this journey.